edible and unedible food. He is visiting us from Portland, Oregon. He's also the editor of the Collins Library imprint at Sweeney's Books, and the author of several books, including Vanguard's Folly, Sixpence House, and The Trouble with Tom. He is, by some measure, the world's leading expert on the history of the universal language Solresol. Mr. Collins.
Thank you. It's true that I was in fact considering buying a 106-year-old Cadbury bar off of eBay recently. However, for my own health, my wife did talk me out of this purchase. Now, I want you to imagine that every cadence of what I'm saying, and what the previous presenters have said tonight, in fact, carried some kind of message to it. And not merely metaphorically. I mean an actual message in the cadences of their speech. An entirely different set of information than what they may have been telling you. Or if you prefer, imagine the nails and the flooring of the stage, but the pattern of those nails and the number of the nails being used also communicated entire paragraphs of information. Or, say you're sitting on the subway, and you're looking at someone across from you, and the pattern of threads in their clothing, the pattern of the colors, communicates an entire text to you, other than Old Navy. This is, in fact, a possibility. Beginning in 1817, a music teacher in Paris, Jean Sudra, began working on musical language. This is something that actually began when he was working as a violin teacher. And he came up with a method of using musical notes as a substitute for language, so that he could communicate from across his apartments with his students. And his first idea for this was to actually use this for the military, to use it with trumpets, so that units in the military could communicate over long distances. He tried to sell this to the French government. And they were very impressed, but they said, well, we don't think it goes quite further. It doesn't go quite far enough. We have some problems with the amount of distance you can get with a trumpet. He then proposed a system of tuned cannons to send messages. Not rotulas, by the way. But, they also thought this was a wonderful idea and said, yes, we should adopt this. We should give you some money for this idea. And they did neither. By the early 1830s, he decided that since the military wasn't going for this idea of his, that perhaps the rest of the world would. And so he began to develop for civilians Solresol, the universal musical language. And you'll notice in your programs tonight, on one side is this wheel. And this is basically a summary of the Solresol language. In other words, what he's done is, each word in Solresol is made up really of music. He took this at all. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, because they didn't have T back then. And he initially created this and decided if you have 5 syllable, you can go from 1 syllable words all the way up to 5 syllable words, using just these 7 letters, so to speak. And that gives you about a working vocabulary of about 11,000 words or so. And so he started to develop a whole Solresol dictionary. He also decided that you could also express these ideas. You could have your letters be transposed into colors, or into hand signals, or for that matter, into shorthand. And so he spent decades working on this, and went all around Europe demonstrating this method, spent decades working on elaborate dictionaries and grammars for this method. And I'm just going to read to you, this is an open letter that appeared from an admirer of his in French newspapers when he was in the middle of touring around Europe trying to get them to adopt this method. Jean Sudra is offering to us at this moment a new and sad example of the fate of all inventors in our inattentive, forgetful, and jealous society. For 20 years he's been fighting, swimming against the current, and for 20 years they have sent him about his business. They scorn him in 1,000 ways. They make promises not kept. Meanwhile, the poor man is using, in order to exist, his last resources and those of his friends. After having used on his works both the small fortune that he possessed and 20 years of his life, Sudra, who moreover has always refused to communicate his secret to foreign powers who would have paid very well for it, has an evident right to compensation. One commission, appointed by our Minister of War, finally concluded several years ago, in the government's 8th report on Sudra's method, that in exchange for ceding the inventor's secret to the government, a sum of 50,000 francs should be allotted to him. This offer being accepted without reservations by Sudra, he communicated the secret of his method to the members of the commission. And yet, the method has not been adopted, and the 50,000 francs has not been given over. This poor inventor, in order to live, is driven to the last measures. If he is not indeed driven mad, he will die of hunger. But this is the fatal law to which the unfortunate inventors have, in all times and places, been subjected. 2 years have not passed since they wrote of the impossibility of the use of the electric telegraph, whose conduction power across the wires, they said, would be paralyzed by simple contact with a bird. Shortly, we will have a repetition of the same spectacle for a discovery even more important, that of directing aircraft by propellers in inclined planes. The audacious mechanic who wishes to give man wings will experience strong and obstinate resistance. He will be ruined. He will die in the harness. He expects to die, and he is prepared for it. But navigation of our aerial ocean will be open to us sooner or later, and our descendants will be astonished that their fathers once crawled upon the earth's crust like infirm animals. Signed, Hector Berlioz, November 17, 1849. I might add as a postscript that I flew across the country last night. I'm very pleased to now present the first dramatic performance ever of Solresol. This is the balcony scene from Romeo and Juliet.